So welcome to the second and last iteration of Enclave. I'm Bray Armentrout. Jean Huving and I have been organizing this series for some time now. Today we have Charles Alexander, who will be introduced by Jean. The audience will remain muted and the chat function turned off. We hope this doesn't seem punitive, but during the reading, we want to reduce stray noise and protect ourselves from Zoom bombings, etc. On next week, on November 22nd, we have Liz Willis. And then our final event on November 29th will be Layli Long Soldier. So we really hope that you can join us for those readings. Before we do the intro, I want to give Jean Huving a little intro too. Jean is a professor of interdisciplinary arts at the University of Washington, Bothell, and she is also, of course, a poet and a scholar. Her great prose poetry collection, Mood Indigo, appeared this year from Selva Oscura Press, and she is also the author of two recent critical books, The Transmutation of Love and Avant-Garde Poetics from University of Alabama Press, and Inciting Poetics, Thinking and Writing Poetry, a collection of essays co-edited with Tyrone Williams from University of New Mexico Press. And now I hand it over to you, Jean.
I'm really delighted to introduce Charles Alexander to this enclave. Charles Alexander is a poet and bookmaker, founder and director of Chax Press, a small press that has been in existence and publishing books for over 30 years. And before that, 10 years of fine book arts. He is also a professor of poetry and creative writing. Today, we are here to hear his poetry, a poetry that is devoted to writing the present of experience as writing, the unfolding of an ephemeral, sometimes sorrowful, sometimes evanescent present, as it becomes always other than it just was. Patrick James Dunnigan writes of Charles Alexander, his writing is a testament to the abiding determination to have the daily practice of writing and reading serve as a guiding force through life. Hank Glaser draws attention to how its tentativeness is an ethical gold standard. If it is that, it is also always of the moment we live, an unfolding of the fluidity of experience and the things of this experience. Susan Schultz draws an analogy of Charles' poetry with her seeing men in China writing poems on sidewalks with water, a writing that then disappears. As she emphasizes about Charles' poetry, his poetry is a gathering in and then release of the world. I find the analogy of writing poems with water on sidewalks particularly descriptive of one of the predominant qualities of Charles' poetry. It's ephemeral. It's not a very ephemeral word, okay? It's ephemerality. This a surprising quality given how much of Charles' existence has always been taken up with the material of bookmaking itself, not only as a publisher of artfully designed and published works, but also as a book arts maker. It's as if Charles is up to his elbows in the physicality of books, the materiality of printed words, exists in a counter-universe in his poetry of the very ephemerality of experience and writing itself. Ephemeral art has been much lauded recently and in preceding times, perhaps most saliently in its response to museum and gallery systems and their moneyed hierarchies. Thus, a value-laden art practice of the ephemeral is of that which happens apart from established venues of performance, fluxus, etc. But what about ephemerality as poetry written and inscribed in multiple books? Is there an ephemerality of printed matter? Is it an oxymoron to talk of the ephemerality of a book, a stable artifact? I think we would need to turn to Charles Alexander's series of poems titled Pushing Water. Doesn't the title already tell us a great deal? In poetry writing, doesn't one need in some way to push? But how could one ever push water? Charles first published his Pushing Water poems as early as 1998, and they have appeared in multiple volumes of his verse, including in the book Certain Slants, and most recently in At the Edge of the Sea, Pushing Water 2. In Certain Slants, the Pushing Water series alternated with another series, Chronicle being a more hard-edged writing. Since then, it seems that it has been almost all pushing water, as these poems incorporated both hard edges and moving lines. This poetry grasps and then lets go. It finds a formal patterning and then discovers another and then refuses both. This, to borrow from the title of an early book of Charles, is Charles' Hopeful Buildings, his ephemeral landscape. For readers to grasp this work, they must enter into its in-between spaces. Charles writes, the political philosophy of the poem is that of its distribution of its words over space and time. Elsewhere, if something breaks the water, what will it be? If something breaks the air, what will it be? Everything discloses something else, something to sing in the air of June. What then about the air of November? Here is Charles.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. That was wonderful. I have to tell you, though, I'm going to be in a box on either side of Pushing Water today and not read from that work of so many years, but read briefly from much earlier work and then read from some work that's only several weeks old. So this is the title poem from my first book, Hopeful Buildings. I don't think my buildings are probably quite so hopeful anymore, but I don't know if any of ours are. But a sky hangs over the earth, another inflates the room. Stormy weather unites tribal factions where nothing succeeds like oppress. Blocks bear letters, become sites for architects' wordings, chosen models by chosen leaders bear chosen delights. Selection involves subtraction. Multiples divide. A fifth of beauty becomes drink for millions. No mana here provides dividends. No money here defines evidence. Starvation litters streets where once rodeo paraded. A horse is a horse, of course, unless, of course, the house is dead. No steersman provided. We learn elementary functions and cannot. Accepting dials are turned to proper channels. Convince the powers that be not to be. Frightened children encourage vivid portrayals. What helps? Fighting kindred have courage, live in portals, not yelps. Unseen kitchens give eggs and vegetables. Tables turn themselves with some help from calendars. What day is it? Bicycles gain motors, fly without wings. One dreams on the street where she lives. In a family, she wears pants and father comes home or not. The pictures on the wall have come down, and none is the worse for wear, not this year. End one issue, terse or fair. No, this mirror unites a sense of self to world, not spoken in code or surrendered to a father. Child waits for words no one teaches. Woman or some other kind of friend who reaches into a night and pulls out constellation, reconstitutes a dream with interchangeable parts. No person accepts a role that won't change to lead or follow. We move somewhere here, look out the window, gauge the light. Free, toothsome air, hear a shout of wind, oh, change the night. Not every syllable contributes to plot, syntax baffles. Everything can be removed and still a sight stands, not denuded, not bombed. Restructuring follows. And is never finished, or has not yet begun to fight. Some enemies are known. Their names signify signs. Friends hum in the wings of sound. Angels survive avalanche. Shuffle the blocks and buildings. Make a new sentence. Slow flow the clocks and stillness shakes a nuisance tense. Stand aside, she said. I'm scared of change, but see the need. So do we all, or live in a dry riverbed, wait for flood. Monthly waters are models to live by. Or make children wait for food. The end of the line changes the sense. We know that and little else. How to bake a loaf, perhaps, or bite the bullet that feeds us. May the force mix strands with baked goods. Ounces of tablespoons answer. Star switch, ached moods. Chances of able tunes after. Swear you won't tell me I'm mad. I'll read you lines. Lines of age, lines of change. Post office lines indicate willingness to communicate. Though alphabets in disarray provide opportunities to amass monies as well as goodwill. Return to the city. The blocks still stand. Facades have changed to color. Now, what is wrong with that? Question me and answer. Fiddle with everything and listen to music. Handle with airy ring, endless amusement. Shadows tell us not as much as mirrors divided into surface sense and sight's reflected glory. Take time to hear a story, listen for openings. Strategy aligns itself with mess, creates witness, approaches message. Entry requires a door. But designers have options therein, make choices. Not shy changes for mirth. A brother creates a loom. That was my first book. The second book I had that was published was Arc of Light, Dark Matter, which Segway, James Sherry brought out. And it's, when you talk about that consistent changing, maybe that ephemerality that Jean spoke of, this is composed in something like that looks like long paragraphs, but everything in it is, there are no sentences. They're all phrases separated by commas. And I think, well, there's a epigraph that I'll read that maybe says something about this. And it's from Deleuze and Guattari, A Thousand Plateaus. A single thing or word undoubtedly has this twofold nature. It is necessary to extract one from the other, to transform the compositions of order into components of passage. I'm just going to read one of these sections from this, and it's 13. Not to blow up the moon. Great taste made affordable. Her military sinews translated into male terms, like a desert with its craters and seas that seemed ancient, ample, malformed but not cognizant, who are skilled in the lessons of seduction, smiled madly into the heat, from a center, not the other way around, comfortable with guns, not the way teaching began, with black fog spoken while running on a court audible to a few, chomping at the bitten fruit, not another piece of pie that brought all this upon us, child indicating rain, not dyed or injected with perfume, simultaneity as an aspect of ritual, but not prefigured as were the bombing runs, boring no one, layers of color not entirely distinct from one another, with every egg keeping less yeast, foreign, offering forgiveness to blue oceans, into an enclosure, where we began as in cut and paste until he repeats himself or discovers another presence, crossed out, attending a funeral in which the deceased had never been identified, change of shoes, from an old book which had sat upon a shelf for more than a decade, but never lost, as in the way the river turns into the earth, the grandmothers, not upset with all the destruction. A parental attitude, nearly always a mistake in diplomacy, over the border where we miss them very much, a recognized postmark, birth toward waiting for substance, not to begin another, issues walking, technical information disguising the blood, arrangements of fork and spoon as indicators of integrity, not the wine, always more print than person, descending as a gift on a train sleeping through Pennsylvania, where the early morning woods contributed silver, struggling to be brown or not at all. Okay. So that seems a long time ago. I think I've been looking at that work because some of it's getting published, translated into Chinese and published in China and through odd and continuing and wonderful connections. So the last piece I'm going to read, and it's has 16 sections, although none of them are long, is part of a work I'm working on right now. And as Jean talked about my history in bookmaking and with books, and this series uses aspects of work in that field almost as windows on a wider world. And one of the 16-part sections is on paper and things like watermarks. One is on metal type, and one is uses the work from thinking about ink. And the one I'm working on right now has to do with the book as a whole, but this is a section that has to do with type, but not really about type, but it uses that terminology and technology to see other things. There's a couple of parts of it that either are a sound poem or have a visual thing where I'll share the screen a little bit, but for most of it, I won't. And it's titled Metal, Light, Mark. Some readers noticed no difference between capital I and lowercase l in sans serif fonts. Some noticed very little difference in those letters in serif fonts, not to mention J, which enters the alphabet at a later time in history, and in some instances is not at all distinguished from I. Yes, we muddle our letters, though those who work with metal may know the difference better. Perhaps a matter of a slight change in thickness one feels when holding a capital I versus a lowercase l. But in a drawer of type, a lot depends on who distributes letters and whether they do it well, so that letters enter the wrong compartments, and there are consequences in spelling and reading, and one way or another, the entire cookie crumbles, and a world without cookies is a word without order. Though one walking through the rubble might simply continue through without much notice, because letters aren't like fjords. They don't involve the possibility of slipping into the sea or drowning in some sense. They don't exist at all in a digital world. What I mean is that a letter is like an idea of a letter, a representation of a letter, which is a representation of a sound, which may be in collections with other letters, a representation of meaning. And it seems that everyone knows one can walk through a room without any sense at all of gathering a meaning, or even gathering a remembered view, no matter how the light is streaming through the window, and whether a letter or a name or a word perhaps on a glass door or in a picture frame might be illuminated, because an illumination is not quite a shout, not quite a roar, but a sort of ray that one can pass through, pass over, pass under. All things pass, we say, or sing in a shower of lowercase L or uppercase air. A bit of sharing. Okay. La, 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 je, la, je, la, la, e, a, without, out, light. Oh, if once upon a la, je, or a, Lura, Lee. Now, Wilma, the yellow-haired boy, well, I don't know about that. Film at 7. Well, if and Bill agrees, Furton, such a fright I am. Okay. There we go. If the whole case is spilled, we should not italicize the problem. This is just not to say anything about plums, but about why there are letters at all. Why not just sounds? But oh, how beautiful the impression in a sheet of paper when metal letters are pressed into its surface. Whether a very light impression, which we call a kiss, very appropriate for rather thin sheets of paper, or when printing will occur on both the front and back of a page, so one page does not interfere with the other. Or a deep impression, and I don't think there is a name for such. No, just deep impression, meaning one sees an edge to the letter, an edge of paper that has been impressed. Or one can even print blind. No, not a blind printer like the marvelous blind samurai in films. To print blind is to print without ink, but with a deep enough impression so that the letter, or more likely the letters, the words, the names, the messages, the squibbles and scrunts are seen even without any ink. One cannot read in the darkness, but one can read without the benefit of ink, even in decades and centuries before we all began to read without ink on screens illumined from within or behind. I still want to see through words, want to see the ink of words, want to see the ink spill upon words, want to see words between words, words through words, words within words, palimpsest, or maybe just memories of words that may just be the representation of what new words represent, the kind of signified behind the signifier, all of it light and fury, signifying something. Put the metal in the kettle. The case is a case, of course, unless, of course, the horse, of course, is Stewball with a swollen heart, or maybe some Mr., but a case is also a case of letters, a brace of non-QWERTY layout, more like this. Okay, here's the quiz. Which letter has the largest compartment? Yes, lowercase e, because E is a big scream and it takes a big space, like the space of our screaming and bloody streets at present. in places like Minneapolis and Kenosha. And well, sometimes it seems like just about everywhere. And one has to acknowledge that mess, though this case is not a mess. No E occurs with more frequency than any other letter of the alphabet, so it gets the biggest box. Or maybe from a single E, one can extrapolate an alphabet, a language, a book, all books, like the E on the stone, the Etruscan E, or the E in Delphi from the Oracle. And I has two E's, and I have as many E's as it takes because the language doesn't cost money and doesn't earn money. Walk with a letter, talk with a letter, take the time to write a letter. Don't pack a letter, don't muzzle a letter, don't shoot. Put the letter in the stick. Put the letter in the stick. Put the damned letter in the stick. Upside down and backwards, what does that even mean? Mind your P's and Q's. Mind your B's and D's. Mind your P's and Q's and B's and D's, because when it is flipped backwards, try that, a backwards flip. Can you do it? A lowercase p looks like a Q. A lowercase b looks like a D, and vice versa, which I guess means upside down and backwards. And upside down Q looks like D, and upside down P looks like B. We're all just voiceless fricatives on this bus. So saying mind your P's and Q's and B's and D's is like saying do the right thing. Though Spike Lee might have done that more quickly and with more aplomb. Plum, 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 A, even though the movie takes longer, and now we are back in the streets. Watch the film. Italicize sounds like an order, doesn't it? Right flank, move ahead, fall out, italicize. I don't live in an army. The only army I see on anything close to a daily basis is an army of ants, and they don't quite march in couplets like the present lines. But armor is made of metal, probably titanium these days, light in weight and hard as hell. And I don't know titanium, but lead ain't dead, or so printers like to say, knowing full well they may be fighting a losing battle as more people each year read books on Nooks and Kindles, and whatever device may be out next Thursday, but really lead ain't quite dead yet. In fact, I have some of it in a room full of inks and paints and papers and brushes and markers and a printing press and lights and bone folders and linen threads and needles, because lead is load, is light, is love, or maybe I just made that up, but one can truly print love, either as a word or a heart or a poem that tears you apart as much as a bullet, though in an entirely different way. Please don't fall in the way of a bullet. Please fall in love. From A to Z and from Z to A, lead contains not really metal, but ideas. And ideas are what one sees when one sees through letters, sees through words, sees through the holes in certain letters, in the holes in paper, in or through the holes we make with one another, one and other. Pit and pitter pat, and what is that, a drover and an open door, or was it an open drawer? I said that in a poem, in a water poem, but pitter pat is rain, and we might say the rain darkens the sky, but that's taking the foot for the body, i.e. the rain for the entire phenomenon of a storm, dark clouds, and all, for really rain is water, and water is clear and does not darken anything, no more than the fingernail blocks the door, or maybe a little more. But the principle is the same, like one policeman is the problem. No, all of the system of policing, a system developed from enforcement, use of force on slaves is the problem. Though it's sometimes true that one policeman is the problem, but one raindrop, or even all of the fall of rain. But what else is dark? Black ink is dark, and one can make it darker and darker, but that could be a problem. Over-inking is a problem. Under-inking is less of a problem because it doesn't look messy, and messy is systematically a problem, while under-inking leaves a little paper, a little air, a little light through the patter of rain, like, yes, we have seen the rain coming down on a sunny day. And we have seen the reflection of light from paper through fibers that are mostly, but not entirely inked. A little bit of under inking is just fine. The coverage is still there. The rain cover, the raincoat, the blue coat, because there are blue coats, not as opposed to red coats, but as opposed to blue lives. But there are no blue lives other than the mythology of Smurfs, who didn't seem to have a problem with rain or blood or ink for that matter. And I want to say to you now, let some of the fiber show. Don't try to make sure ink covers all sins. Il pleut, 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 and no old man, no one, no thing, nothing at all is snoring. The pores are open, why shouldn't the page be open? The page is open, why shouldn't the words be open? Tip me over and pour me out, spill it, spill the wine open upon the sea, spill the water upon the wound, fill the hands with all they can hold, all they could ever hold, all the holes, all the open holes, all the pores, the pages, the words. Il pleut, syllables and letters and morphemes and phonemes juxtaposing beauty, only condense, only connect, and in that condensory have plenty of water, drink plenty of water, spill plenty of water, fill the holes with plenty of water. And if the water brushes a letter onto the stone, let it stand until the light relieves it of weight. Wait. They looked like frightened beads, I thought, Emily Dickinson. Water beads, and bees be. But thought has no bead, though it may take place in or around a bean. The old bean, as they say, not throw the old bean, but think with the old bean. But is thought the product of think, or is thought the process of think? And what does it mean to look through beads again? Sometimes it's not what one looks at, but what one looks through. And if one looks through or likes through or looks at what looks like something, can it look like fright? Can it weigh like freight? Can it sit upon a page and think, or do we just think about it as when a teacher says, okay, take a few minutes and think about it? That's when the mind wanders. That's when they that do the thinking for a few minutes look anything but frightened. Look instead like shining beads in a new rainfall. Water, mark, slurry, lead, decal, coin, ink knife, justify, pigment, impression, il pleut, kiss, viscosity, Coptic, signature, type high, deboss, inclusion, mineral spirits, addition, overs, case, loop, overinked, French flap, M's, ends, galley. Then again, there again, this if one another thinks the air again, thinks the fair, and then what if the stairs shrink and up and down becomes left and right, and we feel trapped in another's making? Can we make it up ourselves, or are we counting beans? Can we do before, can we do after, as in where is the full moon? Are we before or after the full moon? After the arc, we wait. Each letter is potential, each letter a moment then, and we will not always be waiting for the rain. Not formerly, not augustly, no adverbs at all. Think, do, look through, find, do not italicize, do not count hours. The swans above, the ground above, now everything is above. You too, in your house, in the bright sky. We set type. But what does set mean? What is the movement of the hand, of the fingers, of the other hand holding a composition stick? And you must stay composed while composing. We say setting type is composing type. But is it like composing music? Is it like composing a sonata or a chorale or a symphony or a variation? Yes, a variation with a notch, for there stands a notch in each piece of type, each letter. And when we reach into one of the compartments, which holds only one letter, reach in with index finger and thumb, or sometimes index finger and middle finger and thumb to pick up the tall letter, type-high letter, and turn it so that the notch points out away from our hand. The letter is on top of the piece of type, and we set it in the composing stick with top of letter to the back, notch side of letter facing out. The first movement of the composition sets a song. We continue as we repeat the motion with each letter until we have a line of type, like a line of a poem, the line a structural unit with any number of variations, justified or unjustified or symmetrical. But that gets us from one line to 2 lines to 3 lines, and soon we might have a form not like a paragraph, but a substantial amount of metal, a weight, more than which one doesn't risk holding in a hand in the single stick of composition. The form slides, or we slide the form off the stick and onto a tray, a galley tray, a flat metal tray with walls on 3 sides. We slide the form into a corner and tie it with string. The form has a metal piece, perhaps 6 points wide at its beginning, another at its end, and between each line, a piece of lead only 1 or 2 points wide. These are the building blocks of poems and stories and novels and dictionaries and encyclopedias. In any given type drawer, a possible world that depends on the printing and the reading, the moving through the holes to open to the light and let something in and something out. Let it breathe, let it rain. Originals and copies. 1 and sets. She sets out to be 1, and if opposed, overinks the opposition and cancels the possibility of multiples. If not 1, a foundational multiple, or multiple on the edge of a void. If void, has 0 become 1, or on the edge, 1 on the brink of becoming 0? The multiplicity of being, or the being of 1 in multiples, if it proclaims a natural stability, must give up on self-definition. But in an addition, no such thing exists as an identical copy. No such thing exists as a perfect print. No such exists at all. On the high plane, the vision is of an elemental flatness, where flatness is not an element, and nothing is flat anyway. The earth is round and imperfect. Belonging to the situation this time, the generic is an intrinsic indiscernible, therein a variation with a notch, but a discernible notch creates the 1 on the edge and the many on another edge of the table. Sometimes the rollers, those operators of fidelity, covered with ink, are less than stable, and sometimes they require adjustment again and again, adjustment so that at some time the words on paper will not seem ill-adjusted. Are we ill-adjusted, and do our visions see through the stable words? Do our unstable words float somewhere beyond the page, through the mark, softer than metal? If print A is true, must print B be true? If A entails B, it is an intuitive idea some of us had once upon a Roma, whose near-perfect ridges disrupt the lines of the poem, just as they elevate these same lines to the status of felt things. Here's the obligation of demonstration. There, the disruption of protested enunciation. Tell me true, do you love me, Cindy Who? Do you fix your hair for me? Will you sail across the sea? Only if I ask you to, will you stay, my Cindy Who? My Cindy wind, my perfect find, come to me and ease my mind. My icy frost, my tempest tossed, you come to me at such a cost. And sweet reward shines a light, the word impressed so tight. Upon the hill will fly our kite, and loose the words with each new height. I dream of ink, on the page, on the hands, on the shirt, on the wall. And does ink dream a new color, or color dream a new direction? In Blake's light, the angels offer an arm outstretched, but the light is both affirmation and barrier. That is, Can we enter such light, or does it remain on our void, our edge, something we can imagine but not be? As if imagination might be being as real, being as a field one might enter. But this field only has words, words about stories of words, back to that mouth, that muthos, that story of word from mouth to poem to print on paper. Our story goes forth, not to a void, but to an inhabitable, interstitial, transformative process, that space she spoke of somewhere between perception and knowledge of perception, somewhere between hearing and reading, reading and speaking, speaking and knowing, or space in which it all becomes muddled and sometimes unmuddled, clear as mud, one has said. Place of print is the devil's workshop. That's been said too, though Lucifer is quite a character and may give grace to thought, and place of rebellion, a privilege for words to go farther than we might hear them, louder than we might speak them. Prometheus is Lucifer, is the conjunction of fire and light, the danger we must risk in muthos, in print, in the manacles in which we find ourselves, in Blake's light on Tsai Lun's page that must be turned and turned again. Now see here, it's just a case of letters, and you can't drink a case of letters, and you can't fit a multiple into a one, or a one into a void, or a light into a fire, or a fire into a sheet of paper without burning all the books down. Firebird dances the story, and Firebird relates a story. Peshtigo and the Eastern Mountains, one unto other. That's enough sometimes. Speak the stories. All that is the case of the lead type, or all that might be. Thank you. That is all.